Welcome to Take 'em or Leave 'em, the MF Report, the only unauthorized Mex Flintayo fan podcast. I am your host, Salt M. Bank. I also have my fantastic co-host, Lan, and maybe there's a little more going on, maybe a little less, maybe you don't know. But
I guess we'll have to see.
Guess we'll have to see. How you doing today, Lan?
I'm good. I'm, just living life energetically on a Sunday afternoon. I'm pissed. Well, no, I'm not pissed, actually. That's a lie. I'm a bit worried, I think, is the best way. Because this is an emergency. This is an emergency podcast.
This is an emergency. We'll get right down to it. This is a, how do I put this? Ancillary, an extension, unauthorized, as we said. Yeah, of the Mex Flintayo auditory universe. And we're going to get it right out of the way. We are here for critical support of our boys, our Latin boys. We are here for them.
We're not here to usurp. Some may think that we're here to usurp. We're not here to usurp.
Critical support only. So we have a pretty full agenda for everything we want to get to, largely encompassing our critical support for our boys. But while we're here, we got some of our own shit. Let's start with an acknowledgement.
All right. So, sorry, this is where the music comes in, and then I'm hyping myself up. And all right, so shout out to Northampton. Shout out to Alan Moore. We know DC keeps fucking you every single year, every single month. And remember, pay David Aya, pay Saad Ribic, and most of all, do not pay Declan Shalvey. Shout out to the Twitter stands that told me to go kill myself, and shout out to Warren Ellis, the musician, not the writer. So, little known fact, I might as well spill the beans. We tried recording this a couple weeks ago. And
lucky for you, we shit the bed.
We fucking shit the absolute bed.
But it's okay, because we're here and we're doing this better.
Yeah, so you won't get to see Salt mess up and mix up the two Ellises this time. Like you did last time. But speaking of last time and speaking of Ellis specifically, so last time, you're not going to ever hear this. You might. I don't know. We'll see. I brought up that I was getting emails from Warren Ellis, the writer, not the musician, because I had an old email that I had subscribed to his Orbital Operations newsletter with. And I kind of just forgot to unsubscribe on that one. And it turns out that he has restarted the newsletter on Button Down as of February. And I only realized this because I looked at my junk folder where...
And what's he telling you in these emails?
Okay, so last time I didn't actually read the emails, but this time I decided, well, we're going to do this again. We're going to go at it straight. So I figured I might as well just read the email this time before actually going into it. And it turns out that my inbox auto-deletes junk emails. So I actually had to go to Button Down and look through the archives to find the email that he sent. He sent multiple emails since, but the basic gist of it is there is good progress insofar as reparations with the victims of the So Many of Us group. It turns out that they put out an update on January 31st of this year, and it says that they're making good progress on rehabilitative change with Ellis. And then he just kind of goes on with the news, just the usual Orbital Operations stuff that came out before it came out that he was an abuser. So
do you think he's making any meaningful progress with that?
It's tough to tell because, again, this is just like one missive, and he's probably not going to go deep into, the past year or two of his life while writing a newsletter. So Who
Yeah,
knows?
well,
But I mean, again, the So Many of Us page does indicate that they have reached good progress or are making good progress with Alice. So I think uh, that's just good to keep, trusting in their judgment. I think if anything changes, they'll be the first ones to let us know.
yeah, I mean, this
Alice, I mean,
is
the nice thing is that like it's not like Ellis has immediately jumped back into work. Like Castlevania, the sequel series Nocturne was announced a couple days ago, and he is not the executive producer of that series, nor is he the writer. So that one's actually being written by a guy named Clive Bradley.
I think that's all pretty surprising in the best way. You know, I think we really get used to we get used to the continuation of the status quo. So I think that's all good. So you know, we're here to talk some comics.
Okay, hold on. One last thing about
Yeah.
that. I just wanted to note that he ends all his newsletters with just W. Like his signature is just W, which, is ironic for a guy who's been taking L's for the past 2 years. All right, moving on.
It's dressed for the job you want, newsletter style.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, we're here to talk comics. We got some other forms of entertainment we're gonna throw at you. Lan, question for you.
Go ahead.
You seen any good movies?
Yeah, I'm gonna keep it real with you. I've been watching movies.
Are you a film buff?
I wouldn't call myself a film buff. I shower. So this past week, I decided to dip my toes back into Indian cinema, and I watched a movie that has received a lot of hype across social media recently. That's right, I watched Vikram, the Tamil movie starring Kamal Hassan.
And how was that?
Yeah, it was actually pretty good. It's been a while since I've actually watched any sort of like Indian movies in theaters, so it was a pretty good experience. Great bombast, very, very gonzo. The politics
Would you call
were
it an action movie? Would you call this an action movie?
Oh yeah, definitely. There's a lot of action, and the nice thing is it's not like super buff dudes fighting. It's like this because again, the lead star is 67 years old. He's got a nice, like gut going on there. But it's not like Steven Seagal fighting. It's like actual choreography and whatnot, which is really cool to see. Just comparing to the West, because we're going to be doing that a lot in the coming moments. It's comparing to the West where everyone's like this bronze and chiseled god. So to just see, like a bunch of dudes with beer bellies, like Sammo Hung types actually
I think
fighting,
Well, there's a lot of really key aesthetic differences in those Indian action movies. I saw a superhero one once. And I'm sorry it escapes me, but there were like 5 of them. This guy has like a mask and a long jacket. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I'm going to keep it real with you. And this is what I'm going to get at right now. When you try and pin down something in Indian cinema, because here's the thing. A lot of people think that Indian cinema is just Bollywood, and that is like the furthest thing from the truth. From here on out, if I ever say Bollywood, I'm probably just encompassing the whole of Indian cinema. But yeah, Indian cinema is comprised of several different mini Hollywood types because India's a large. Krish, yeah, I've seen Krish. It was a good movie. Anyways, yeah, it's comprised of smaller cinemas of their own, each representing a sort of language. So.
I wanted to go off on that a little bit. There's another famous action movie you saw recently coming from that region.
Yeah, so similar region, not the exact same zone. So what Vikram is a Kollywood movie. So Kollywood encompasses all Tamil movies.
Got it.
Why it's not called Tollywood is because Tollywood has already been taken by the Telugu industry. And the Telugu industry is what we're going to be talking about today because that's right. RRR has found itself some popularity.
And some controversy.
And some controversy in the Western audience recently. I figured I'd just bring it up here just because a lot of people have been making comparisons about what cinema should and shouldn't be through the lens of this movie, and honestly, it's just elicited a lot of eye rolls for me. Because I mean, don't get me wrong, RRR is like a fine movie by like Indian cinema standards, and you know, like it's a very successful movie. I think it's like the third most profitable movie in all of Indian cinema. So you know, like I don't want to discount that, but at the same time, I feel like the West is making a far greater deal out of this movie than they honestly should be.
And why do you think that is?
I think it's just a myopic point of view of what cinema is and isn't, as well as what a culture influences within its own cinema. Because to talk about Indian cinema, you have to really go into the culture of India itself. And that goes into things like the politics, because, you know, it's run by a very right-wing nationalistic government that, you know, prioritizes things like disenfranchising religious and caste groups, namely Muslims. Recently, there's been a lot of legislation to discriminate against them. And yeah, that bleeds into the work. It's tough these days to find any Indian movie that isn't inherently political, if that makes any sense. I mean, that could be argued by any media, but it's so intrinsic to the movie itself, but also the culture surrounding the movie. Because, you know, like Indian movies aren't just movies; they're like celebrations. You know, like when I watched the movie, there was very few times where the theater was actually quiet. You know, like when a person would show up, you know, they'd be like hooting and hollering, and you know, like the beginning, they have the credits, which are like crazy. Everyone just goes crazy when they see their favorite movie star's name. It's a whole thing, and the culture is so deeply baked into it. But it's also the one thing that Western audiences seem to not want to really acknowledge when it comes to RRR.
Yeah, I want to kind of delve into that point a little bit. Now, when you say a lot of these movies are political, would it be fair to go one step further and well, yeah, exactly. I mean, are we talking about like fascist themes or fascist symbols or fascist stories in these movies?
Well, not necessarily. Again, my lens of Indian cinema is primarily through Kollywood. But a lot of the politics there deal with like corrupt governments and sort of like Vikram, for instance. The politics in that movie is that the main character, spoilers, I guess, wants to get rid of drugs in India that are ruining, you know, like poor communities. It's, you know, like as far as politics go, it's pretty tame. But you know, it's like a driving force within the movie, and you'll have like segments where the main character will just go on and on about this sort of like drive that's pushing them to, you know, like kick ass and take names. But there are other movies that do lean towards a sort of nationalism. In a way, I think the best way to describe it is with RRR specifically, I think it is far more in tune to something like the Ip Man series, where it's mythologizing people that actually existed and taking that cultural context and putting it deep into the movie.
Yeah, when I watched Ip Man, I was like, this is the Chinese analog of Captain America, except it's good.
Yeah, it's crazy because Ip Man was like a real guy. You know, at the end of the day, that's the thing you have to realize is like with RRR and Ip Man and all those movies, these are real people.
Right, you just make them bulletproof for the cinematic version.
Right, exactly. And in RRR's case, they actually do whitewash the characters. So like there's this character Beam who is sort of seen as this like wild, sort of uncivilized character. But in reality, and like in real life, he was actually a very civilized, well-educated man. But the thing is, when you take into consideration caste and religion, this is where that sort of bias bakes itself in, because at the end of the day, Beam, who is of this lower caste, should be seen as a hero, but he shouldn't be seen as much of a hero as he was in real life.
Now that ties into my last question I had about RRR.
Yes.
Now, I saw it on Netflix and I was like, oh, I want to watch this. However, in our conversations, you had told me that the version on Netflix, the Hindi version,
yes,
was akin to something like whitewashing. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
I guess I should probably reiterate that it's not exactly like whitewashing. I think it's just
you are fucking canceled now.
I'm sorry. I'd be spreading misinformation like crazy. No, the difference is that with Telugu movies specifically, Telugu is not the official language. Well, it is an official language of India, but it's not the most prominent language in India. And again, this bleeds into the whole idea of like Bollywood usurping all other forms of Indian cinema as like the or cinema. Whereas, here, even though the answer is benign, the only reason why they're putting it in Hindi on Netflix is to sell you on a whole other service where you can actually watch it in Telugu.
Is the Hindi Netflix version dubbed or just did they reshoot everything?
It's dubbed.
Okay, got it.
But the other thing is, like, most of these things are dubbed regardless.
Yeah.
Like ADR and whatnot. But anyways, that's besides the point. I guess the thing is, like, with Netflix getting the Hindi version, that's the version that most people in the West are going to see. Because, like, they're not going to be going out of their way to buy the I think it's the ZEE5. I don't know. Anyways, they're not going to go out of their way to buy that extra service just to watch the one movie. So they're just going to go to the one that's most accessible to them. In that case is the Hindi version, which kind of just supplants this idea that RRR is a Hindi movie, ergo it's a Bollywood movie. When in reality, it's not.
I think that's a common misconception amongst my fellow whites. I think we've said a lot of good stuff about Vikram and RRR. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we move on, Lan?
The military-industrial complex aspect of it, because a lot of people are comparing this to the MCU and how media should and shouldn't be. So first off, stop. Don't do that. That's stupid. It's like these are two completely different types of media, and like comparing one to the other and saying that one isn't, like this is just the MCU but better, or like this is superhero movies but better. It kind of just like completely forgoes the culture.
I'm getting some real Boss Baby vibes from this.
Yeah. Yeah, getting a lot of Captain America. You did this earlier. When you said Ip Man was like the Chinese Captain America.
Yeah, and I'll just say I did. I'm not going to deny it.
Yeah, that's right. You're canceled now.
Let's go.
Yeah, so that's one aspect of it. But a lot of the other aspects of it is seeing the hypocrisy of people who would otherwise criticize the MCU for its like militaristic roots, like all the partnership with the DoD and all that jazz, and then unabashedly going to cape for RRR, which is so baked in the sort of like it's not inherently nationalistic, but it is nationalistic. It spurs on nationalistic ideals, I think is the best way to put it. So yeah, it's blindness. And I think the final word I have to say is just like, when you're watching movies from other places in the world, do a bit of research at least into those cultures, because not only is it going to inform how you watch the movie, but it also informs how you understand the movie and acknowledge the movie outside of just the work itself, if that makes sense.
No, I think that would be good advice for everybody, because otherwise I just watch every movie and I say, oh, this is Mexican Captain America. This is Canadian Captain America. That's actually how I watch all my movies.
Yeah. And honestly, everything is just a spinoff of Captain America. Anyways, Indian cinema is great. RRR by Indian cinema standards is a fine movie. But please expand your horizons. Watch Indian movies. Don't go to me for recommendations, because I'm still only just starting to get back into them after going on hiatus for like a few years.
Well, I don't know if I'll go to you for recommendations, Land, but
Yeah,
I do appreciate your cultural commentary here, because I really don't know any of this, and like all I see is like what the discourse I see online, and I see lots of like really broad generalizations about movies like RRR, and it's like I can't look at that and say right or wrong. I just, as a Westerner, like I know, like, okay, these are Westerners interpreting this movie. So
yeah.
I'm really glad to hear you sharing like what a lot of the nuance here. And I know we're really just scraping the surface as it is.
There's a lot, and I think there's already a lot of think pieces in that sort of like Indian critic sphere that touch on this way deeper and way better.
Yeah.
Do go and search for that, because I'm not gonna sit here giving you recommendations. We're running out of time.
We're all running out of time till that big chill or the big crunch comes from the center of the universe and it all implodes. Anyway, moving on. There was well, you know what? I'm just gonna say it now. We have a third mic.
That's true.
You didn't know that.
You've been scamboozled. You thought it was just us two, but it turns out there was a third one. Why don't you introduce yourself?
The whole time I've been listening to the lovely conversation. Yes, hello. I am Twitter user Paracelsus, also on the show today. Very happy to be here. I guess if you're listening to this, there's a very, very high possibility you know who I am. But if you don't, I'm generally just an NPC on the game that is Twitter. And I just participate, and
that's a lot of hubris. I'm just gonna say it up front. That's a lot of hubris. You're just setting yourself up for failure here.
No, I mean, I generally don't. I guess I'm not like under any. How do I say this? I tend to assume. No. I tend to assume that like the audience of like people.
Yeah, we have no idea who this is going to, honestly.
Who care about comics enough to listen to comics podcasts is like not the widest net you could ever cast. So there's a fair chance.
It's not the widest net, WIDEST, and it's not the whitest net. WIDEST. Gotcha.
Well, there's another reason. There's another reason I'm glad we have you on, Paracelsus. Do you prefer Para or Paracelsus?
Para, please. Yeah.
Para.
Use my art for identification.
Yeah, there's another reason I'm glad we have you on, because as far as my relationship to comics goes, like I'm largely like a fan and or critic. I don't know. I'm a consumer. Mm-hmm. I do write and draw occasionally, but it's so sparingly now with everything else I do. I don't really call myself a comics artist, and
okay.
I think of the three, you're really, not to speak for you, Land, but I think you're the only one here who's like a full-on comics maker, right?
Yeah, I guess you could say that, even though I need to get better about saying that, but I'm glad you...
That's why I'm saying it, bud.
Yeah, I guess you can say that, yeah. No disagreements.
So we have a bona fide comics artist with us here today.
Yeah, that's right.
In the flesh.
All right, so we got Para here. We got the boys. The smoke is cleared. The pigeons have cleared. We had our really dramatic John Woo entrance. We got a topic we're gonna talk about today. Isn't that right?
Oh yeah, it's an emergency topic.
It's an emergency, but like we said, we recorded already for this show, and shit the bed. It's in the past. Yeah. But I'm glad we've
Para's not just been here for this podcast. Para's been here for the other recording too.
But I'm double scamboozled. I'm glad we put some paths between us, because I felt when we first talked about this before, we were in like a kind of a react space, and I don't know if you can ever truly escape that. But I've been able to meditate on this a lot, and I think we can now look at this series in a little bit more of a historical context with where comics are going, and that is we are talking about Action Comics.
Oh yeah, the Action Comics.
So dust is cleared. We've got Para with us, and we are talking Action Comics today. Specifically, we are talking the recent run by one Philip Kennedy Johnson.
Dun, dun,
Al,
dun.
Al, never forget the artists, never forget the colorists, maybe forget the letterers. But yeah,
I mean,
PKJ.
there's good reason here to like focus this on the writer, but yeah, thank you for mentioning
there's
the artist.
Great reason to forget the letterers.
This is an anti-lettering space. Watch out.
This is not a safe space for letters.
So there's a lot to cover here. A lot I think that is important to all of us. But before we go into any of these,
do you want me to give a summary of like the
exactly? Yeah. Can you just give us a quick minute?
The rundown of Action Comics. So the Philip Kennedy Johnson run started with issue number 1029. So around this time, he was writing both the Superman run and the Action Comics run concurrently. So Superman he wrote from issues 29 to 32, which is also just set up for what he's writing now. From John's perspective, that was then later rebooted into Superman, Son of Kal-El, written by Tom Taylor. You know, that just deals with the great stuff like school shootings, with absolute tacit understanding and respect for the subject. Anyways, PKJ kept going with Action Comics, and he is currently on issue 1044, which comes out at the end of this month, which is June. So this current arc that he's in is called the War World arc. It started with issue 1036. So some quick things about War World. Last recording, I was completely in the dark about what War World actually was. Turns out it's existed since the 80s. It was created by Len Wein and Jim Starlin. So you can get a good understanding of how subtle the nuance is when it comes to War World. And this primarily focuses on the character Mongul. But guess what? Turns out...
Subtleties, nuances, Mongul?
So it turns out that this character Mongul, not to be confused with Mongols, you know, Mongols. This is Mongul, is not the first Mongol to fight Superman, nor is he the second Mongol. He's actually the third Mongol to ever fight Superman. And he is the son of Mongol 1. Again, do not question me on the continuity. DC's already fucking that up enough. You know, Dark Crisis, Infinite Frontier, Death Metal, Dad Metal. Fuck.
I mean, I'm way more out of the loop than you are. And like when I read through this series, for me, it was just like, what if you did Superman as Conan the Barbarian?
Oh yeah, and you can really get those vibes later on as Federici joins. But we'll get onto that later. So last time I didn't read a damn thing from this run, just because I wanted to be cool and crass and learn from you guys. But this time I've done some reading, and specifically I've read 4 issues out of the 15 PKJ has written for this series. Those are issues number 1035, 1036, 1039, and 1043. Now, Salt, I understand that you've also read some issues. Which ones are those?
Read is a very charitable verb there, but
I mean, I skim too, buddy. I skim too. I ain't reading this. I ain't reading this shit deep.
Not even reading.
My ass is not reading.
My ass is not reading.
No, yeah, I actually skipped the dialogue balloons to honor the artists better. I read 1040, 1041, and 1042.
And Para, which ones did you read?
I read 1037 and 1038 like seconds before jumping on this call.
Readers at home, for those keeping count, that means that across the 3 of us, we've all read this entire run. From 1035 to 1043.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've read this entire arc, so we know what we're doing, is what I'm trying to say here.
Well, and we're not necessarily interested in covering all the story beats. I think what I really want to look at with it, I want to look at this comic broadly in terms of what's it aesthetically trying to accomplish, what's it thematically trying to accomplish, does it do that, and then how that affected readers, specifically online readers, and then this weird loop that was suddenly formed where that affected our dear Mr. Johnson.
Oh,
Does that sound good? Do we want to get into it from there?
Yeah.
that's a
Do
pretty good
I should I
timeline.
start with the precursor, the prelude to all this?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
do
it
it.
turns out that everything from 1035 to the beginning of PKJ's tenure was actually just set up for the War World stuff, including his future state stuff. Which again, Salt, you can get into that after. But 1035 is where I started, and that's the big Daddy Goes to War issue. So that's where he's telling everyone, "Oh, I gotta go save another world."
Oh.
I think we
issue.
gotta pause on that daddy bit for a second. I mean this as a compliment. I think this is one of the strengths of the comic. This is one of the gayest Superman comics I've ever seen. This is like
Okay, here's the
super
thing. I
daddy.
think it is simultaneously the most homosexual Superman and also the straightest Superman.
Yes, yeah.
I think that's the best way to put it. Just because the content versus the visuals, there's so much dissonance there. Superman's great to look at, is basically what we're all trying to get at here.
If you're looking for a big hairy Kryptonian bear, this is your comic.
I mean, you could also just read Superman and the Authority, but
yes.
Yeah, that was my first thoughts when I actually started reading it. So I'm like, wow, he looks just like the old Grant Morrison Superman and the Authority Superman. I was expecting, the 1996 Michael Jordan Superman, not the Washington Wizards Jordan Superman. But this Superman was like a bit rounder, had like some grayer, some gray temples. Like I'm like, okay, is this
not quite chiseled.
this
Yeah.
is yeah. It's like a more senior Superman. And he's
Like
talking
that
about
look-
his son a lot, which is very
And it's
interesting
funny
to
that
me.
you bring up the Authority because, again, we'll get into that with some of the later issues. But I just think about the shock of anyone that went from reading Superman and the Authority to this run, thinking that they're going to
Oh,
get like a
damn.
nice follow up to that book.
Condolences.
Condolences, I gotta say, a moment of silence.
Well, I mean, that book was such a shit show anyway. Like,
Yeah.
you're not going to get any nice follow up.
Yeah, that's true.
I
mean,
mean, the Grant Morrison book was difficult to follow up on.
No way. No way.
That's incredible.
Okay, so 1035. Again, I made the mistake of not reading anything prior to this. So it turns out that this was actually the end of an arc called War World Rising. Unsurprisingly, great names, by the way. The names in this entire run, fan-fucking-tastic.
They roll off the tongue.
So it starts with Mongol using Tao La, who is, I think, a Kryptonian. Again, my ass is not reading. So he's using Tao La to defeat Superman by holding her family hostage, which is a great comics plot beat, a real
This
classic.
is a lovely setup.
It's a lovely
doesn't
setup.
get better than that.
And like her family's being held hostage as slaves, of course. So, the resolution to this is Superman is like super angry. And he's like, damn, I gotta go save the slaves. And for the record,
So he fights as a gladiator.
yeah, so he fights as a gladiator. So, full disclosure, I am pro Superman saving slaves. I don't want to be taken the wrong way when I say that Superman should be saving slaves. I think that's morally a good thing.
So you're telling me Superman is not a colonizer?
No, how could he? How could he be? How could he be? There's this nice big scene where Tao La breaks her chains, like in a very similar iconography to that one picture that we all know, or that one drawing we all know of Superman breaking out of his chains. It's a nice callback. And of course, this apparently also leads into this Batman, Superman, and the Authority one-shot that I didn't bother to read. I don't know if anyone bothered to read. If you did, let us know.
This is news to me. I didn't even know that existed.
Trust me, I didn't know this existed until I skimmed through this issue either. And the issue ends with him saying goodbye to Lois with some banging super sex. Oh, I should note, this issue is drawn by Daniel Sampere, who's currently drawing Dark Crisis, which my ass is also not reading. And yeah, the art's pretty good here. It's pretty house styly, I guess. But in terms of just getting the story across in like a very nice, evocative manner, I think he does a great job. Yeah, so that's issue 1035, which then goes into 1036, which I guess my big note there is that it advertises itself as a Superman and the Authority follow-up on the cover itself. It uses the same logo as that mini. Like it advertises, like Superman is fighting alongside the Authority on War World. There isn't really much to say about this issue. There is this nice little field of crucified slaves just to really hammer home this idea that Mongol, not a good guy, and Superman,
Guy doesn't play
very
around.
good guy. All right, there are crucified slaves. How could Superman be a colonizer when the other guy is crucifying slaves?
Man's literally trying to stop all of this, and
Yeah,
they're
he's-
accusing him of God knows what.
Yeah,
man.
come on. The other big note I have from this issue is that there's a nice little funny bit about Superman getting Botox, super Botox, I should say, from the Authority.
That's so cool.
It's like, because Mongol breaks the illusion in one of their fights, and like prior to this, Superman looks like his normal, regular self, like regular in quotations. But throughout the battle, he transforms visually into that Daddy Superman that we all know of, and now.
Yeah, he gets like the Benedict Cumberbatch like hair transplants, but like Kryptonian.
Yeah, some people would call this a downgrade. I consider this an upgrade. The plot reason for it is that he has radiation poisoning, and I'm sorry, the Enchantress has been juicing him up power-wise, and Manchester Black has been using illusions to maintain the illusion that Superman is young and spry. And Mongol has now broken that illusion and shown Superman as he truly is, with gray hair and a slightly rounder body. He has broken. Broken the Western ideals. Mongol has broken the Western ideals of beauty. God bless.
Mongol decolonized Superman.
Yeah, Mongol exactly. This is post-colonial text right here.
I would love to spend this whole time talking about these outer space alien challenges to Western beauty paradigms, but let's keep it going with some of the let's talk about metaphors, I guess, that continue in this story,
especially with Para's stuff. And Para, this is where you can really chime in, because
so the main thing that I was confronted with as soon as I read the issues that I read, which were again 1037 and 1038, was that the first words that greeted me on the page were, "At last, a day of reckoning for the barbarians at our gates."
Let's go.
I'm hearing this with no context of the story. I'm just like, this is my introduction. Like, hell yeah, dude. Like, let's get into it.
Birth of a Kryptonian nation. Let's go.
Mm-hmm. What I met with is this sort of like cabal. There's like a round table of what we're supposed to assume are, very high-ranking, well-to-do people of this alien civilization. And these people are basically satisfied that Superman is finally about to confront this Mongol person. They are very, they're pleased with how the situation is unfolding. That Superman is their champion, he's their fist, and he's about to deliver justice on their behalf to this Mongol individual who we've just become acquainted with. And the thing that struck me when I was reading it was that, as far as we can tell, Superman isn't aware of this, which was a very sort of like interesting framing to me, because the story is that Superman on his own is, flying to this alien world to, save them. And we have these, this interested third party who they say explicitly that they stand to benefit, greatly from Mongol being, defeated. So are we, the reader, meant to take away that Superman is like an unwilling tool for these, this secret order? It reminded me a lot of that meme where it's like a newspaper cartoon and there's like this like Illuminati table of like a bunch of dudes in suits and there's an alien. Like it was a very sort of like shady, like round table of, higher ups that were, egging Superman on to deliver their justice. And as the issue went on, it was your standard, sort of like, Superman is, trying to basically suss out Mongol's deal. He says at one point, "You're not the Mongol I knew." And that's when I realized that, oh, okay, so Mongol is like, it's like a generational thing. There was a Mongol who was, and this guy's the Mongol who is. And there's lots of that stuff there. And the art, as you guys say, was very, it was a very interesting color palette. It was lots of reds, lots of very textured line work that really drove home the grittiness of the situation. Like this isn't your nephew's Superman comic. This is like serious business. And the serious business continues because Mongol basically tells Superman that like he knows that Superman is Superman because he gets his power from planet Earth's yellow sun, one of the most famous elements of Superman. Like he's powered by the sun. But Mongol tells Superman that on War World, things are different. This isn't Kansas anymore. The War World has a red sun, and Superman is in trouble. And he demonstrates this by, swinging a big axe at Superman, and it injures him, and he draws blood, and it's like, oh wow, Superman is like actually in trouble. He can't just like.
He's mortal. He's not immortal. He's not. Yeah. He's not a Ubermensch anymore.
Mm-hmm. He's not the Superman anymore. He's just a dude, and that dude is in trouble because Mongol does not face any of those limitations. Nowhere close. And Superman has a bunch of allies with him, I believe these are who the authority refers to, but I'm not familiar with them because I don't really read much DC. But these people are with Superman on this crusade. Sorry to call it a crusade, but I can't really think of a better word. So these people are with Superman, and they are, fully prepared to fight Mongol with him. They're, about to engage Mongol. And when Superman is injured, all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, the tides have turned. And then the round table people who we saw earlier, all of a sudden they're like, what? We thought that Superman was the dude that was going to just get in there, take care of everything and leave immediately, and we would benefit. And then all of a sudden Superman is mortally injured, and this woman was wearing pink. Her name was Leah. She shows up and just immediately dies as soon as she shows up, and I was just like, "Wow, this is
always
really
a great
incredible."
Character beat,
Like this. This woman.
I mean, look.
She shows up to deliver one last message of encouragement, and
don't worry, guys, you're gonna do great.
Yeah, just immediately dies. No hope. She never stood a chance. Her body's just like completely crushed. The final shot of the issue is like her just violently disfigured body just laying out there lifeless. And of course, all of our emotion is supposed to be on like how Superman feels about this, because Superman is really sad when this woman dies, and we barely know her name, but like Superman is really sad about it. And then,
well, I would be really sad too to see Pink Cat killed like that.
Mm-hmm, just like lifelessly crushed to dust. And the issue ends.
Sorry, can I interject? I just want to say the Authority is again a Warren Ellis creation, I should say. Warren Ellis and Brian Hitch, and it was the new team was created by Morrison and Mikel Janin for that mini. So again, that's like the new image of the Authority, which I find is always super interesting. Is like they're usurping this old idea of what the Authority is and should be and how they should act with the new one. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it is interesting to see how they're taking that concept from Superman and the Authority and running with it poorly.
Yep,
I should say.
Well, it didn't work that well in Superman and the Authority.
I mean,
you say it's interesting. I would argue the opposite. These are pretty.
Yeah, sorry. I'm saying. Sorry, I had my comics critic hat on there for a second, where I couldn't really come up with any, like good qualitative assessment.
You couldn't say anything. Other
yeah,
than
so
like
it's interesting. It's interesting. Book's interesting. Yeah. I don't know if it's good or not. I just know it's interesting.
Yep, certainly interesting. You could say a lot about it. Yeah, so basically the issue ends, and our main takeaway is that what was supposed to be a very quick and easy reckoning where Superman just swoops in and delivers swift justice to this evil person gets very complicated. Superman is captured, and the mission, as we were, is suddenly complicated. And in the follow-up issue, which I also read, this is, for those keeping track, issue 1038. This issue is basically a very sort of Jesus captured by the Romans type of situation, where Superman is imprisoned. This crowd is chanting for him to be, brought to justice for daring to confront Mongol. The thing Mongol says that I found very interesting was that very interesting. The thing Mongol said that really struck a chord with me and made me pay attention was that he pointed out that Superman came here to free all these slaves. But all these slaves that he came to free are now telling Mongol to kill him. These slaves that he came to liberate are begging their masters to eliminate the would-be source of their liberation. That can he not see how futile that is?
Why?
So this is interesting.
What?
So do we want to start talking about PKJ's thread on this? Because he does
I mean,
actually
I
bring
can't
this
think
up.
of a better time. I can't think of a better time.
I do want to go into PKJ's thread, but to segue just a little cleaner there,
Yeah.
I'm going to go into one of the issues I read, and instead of summarizing the whole thing, I'm just going to read a page, just a few panels, and I think that'll take us to where we want.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys have done a really clear retelling of how Superman is caught up in these gladiator battles, and those poor confused slaves are saying all kinds of silly things. But there's this side cast we've alluded to, the Justice League Z, because they're Z-listers.
Yeah.
The only one I know is the Midnighter, and the issue I have here, I think it's 1040, is focusing on Midnighter's adventure, kind of like trying to put together a resistance group, I guess. So Midnighter is starting shit, beating up guards on War World and rescuing people. Now, because Superman is kind of like an urban legend on this planet, people don't really know who he is. And for reasons, I don't give a fuck why, Midnighter is wearing Superman's cape. So that's all you need to know for this scene. Someone asks, "Are you Superman, truly?" He says, "The name's Midnighter. Superman and I aren't really talking at the moment. Now grab a weapon," and this is key. Midnighter takes a sword, breaks open the chains on one of the slaves' arms, and that's where the shit hits the fan.
Hell yeah.
Oh no, she goes, "What have you done?" Midnighter's super confused, and this formerly incarcerated slave
Keep in mind, this is a black woman saying all this.
in this scene, she's like orange. It's really hard to tell. With
this
the
is
coloring.
this is even the same one as. Oh wow! Sorry for jumping ahead.
This-
So there's
ahead.
more.
No, it's
Hold
okay.
on. There's more than one instance happening.
Yeah.
Oh,
This
my
one didn't get as
Lord.
much traction online. That's why I want to talk about
Holy
this one.
shit,
And you're right, Tara. I think this woman is black in the way that I'm blanking on her name right now. The actress in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Zoe Saldana.
Yes, she's black the way Zoe Saldana is black.
Yeah, I get.
This character is
Black-coated.
orange but black coated. Thank you.
Mhm.
So Midnighter breaks the chains, and she just is really upset, and he's like, "Huh?
Mistake, buddy.
Big mistake, buddy."
buddy.
Because as Lan alluded to, we have kind of an inversion. We have an aesthetic inversion of the power of the chains breaking. So she says, "Who are you to break my iron? I blinded Leonori for one of those." And then this bird man goes, "Iron's the only thing of value here, off-worlder. Touch not that what ain't yours." Now, this is where we get some of the sensitivity of the issue. Is PKJ is writing Midnighter as the sort of naive colonizer, I guess.
Just the white guy.
This
trying to
woman
help
says-
out, yeah.
Yeah.
He's actually
right.
the missionary.
Yes. So this freed woman says to Midnighter, "Taking iron's worth more than your life here. Stupid stray." Then Midnighter says, "Yeah, boy, that chain sure is impressive. I didn't realize it was such an awesome accomplishment. I thought it was just a tool your evil God King uses to keep your back tired and your hands slow, in case you ever figure out he's been filling your heads with lies this whole time. Guess I'll take what I came for and be on my way. If any of you get tired of wearing a leash and doing what you're told, you're welcome to come along. For the rest of you, showing off your chain while you tell me how tough you are doesn't land like you think it does. If you want to show me what you're made of, show me what you can do without it." And then our black-coated woman just kind of sits there pensively.
This feels like he's like
/ end of thread.
It feels like he's like 3 seconds away about making a commentary about like people whose pants sag. You know, it feels like he's like. Speaking of coding, it feels like a lot of the commentary here is racially coded. you know?
I mean,
Well, I wanted to. This is the main point I want to make about that, real quick. Is I think PKJ kind of knew some backlash would happen, and so I feel like he writes this page as like a preemptive defense, and he says,
what you just read like a Twitter thread right now. That's why I was like, end of thread. I'm
Yes.
like, dude, this guy went off, man. This guy. I mean, he
made some
went
points.
off.
He made some
damn,
points,
He
yeah.
made some points.
"Yeah, it's really it's just so hollow, man." But yeah, let's talk about the. I mean, there's so much to unpack and how fucking stupid those panels are.
So
but
just to continue chronologically, at this point, if you've gotten to this point, you have probably gotten to where most people on Twitter reading, this book got to, when the sort of like noise started to, bubble up from the hell dimension of comics Twitter. So as I understand it, there was a user by the name of Dallas Comics who made an observation about this book that
Damn,
we
we're
just
calling out
described
names
to you.
here? Okay.
And
Oh,
now-
shit. Okay, go ahead.
No, it wasn't like a call out. It's just like giving the timeline, I guess, since we're actually describing like what actually happened and not like conjecture. But anyway,
So no opinion was offered in this thread, basically.
yeah, no opinion was offered. It was just an observation. It was like this. Someone observed that this book comes across as very imperialist. And that's before considering who the writer is. Just reading the book, this person has just come to a very innocent conclusion of that, I've just read this book and the vibes here are giving colonizer vibes. Like, it's just, I mean, you can't shake the feeling. It's like a stench that you can't really like sniff away, That's just, and from what we've described, I mean, it's barely subtext at this point with how we've been beating around the bush on it.
I will say, okay, one thing though is like there is some point to it where it's not inherently a colonizer book. So
absolutely.
let me just be clear. This isn't a colonizer book. It's an imperialist book.
Yeah.
It's very imperialist. But again, this is comics Twitter where there is no real nuance when it comes to these things. So
well, and that's what I find so interesting about the Midnighter scene is I think PKJ sort of sets him up as this straw man of like, oh, well, this is what a really dumb guy would do in this situation. But I'm the woke guy, and I would never just break the chains without asking because I understand.
consensually breaking chains, yeah.
Yeah, I would never do the dumb thing. I would do the smart, woke, progressive thing.
So what Para is saying here is we've got some people sussing out that this shit is sus.
Yeah.
And that's what takes us to the epic thread that
The
PKJ
grand
wrote
thread.
to Lan, do you want to take it away with this this thread?
Oh yes, I can do some nice little narration here. So
I don't want to do the whole thing.
I'll do
but let's get the main point.
I'll do the first one first, just because I think
Sure.
that really gets like the point across from the get-go. So on May 19th, 2022 at 10:52 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, PKJ Philip Kennedy Johnson said, there was some noise earlier about Superman being a colonizer / Warworld being Iraq in current #Action Comics. I'm confident readers already know that's untrue, but with all the ruckus that followed, I think it's worth a few minutes to talk about what action actually is. Thread. There is no thing that is more threatening on Twitter than seeing a tweet that either ends with thread or the thread emoji.
Caution, psychic damage incoming.
Caution, this is not a place of honor. So, for the record, this is a 22 tweet thread, a 22 tweet defense of his own work.
If you really want to read the whole thing, Lan told you how to find it.
So I'll do a proper PKJ primer later, but if a primer of his activity on Twitter is that he is a name searcher.
Hell yeah.
He loves searching for his name and seeing every single thing that is said about his work, be it positive or negative. And it's crazy because he doesn't just name search, like his full name, Philip Kennedy Johnson, or Philip K. Johnson. He also searches like PKJ.
Whoa.
So he goes deep. I remember one time I was trying
didn't know
to
that.
say just PKJ because I thought, like, oh, it's just an acronym. It's not like he's gonna find it. And the man
Right, you're just trying to
found,
speed it up.
yeah, and the man
That's
found
wild.
the thread.
Oh,
This
dude, I
is-
can't wait for him to listen to this.
Yeah,
That'll
so
be
This is a
great.
guy. This is a guy who lets his work speak for itself. I think you
Well,
can see that.
I think it's the opposite. I think he lets himself speak for his work.
No,
This guy who's very confident.
No,
This
man,
guy who's
Par
very
is-
confident in his writing.
Yes, he's
lets
very
it speak
confident,
for
yeah.
itself.
Par is on another level here. I fully agree. He lets his work speak for itself because the Twitter reacting is his like performance art.
That's true.
The comics is just what instigates it. This is the show, baby.
Yeah, he's not getting paid to write comics. He's actually getting paid for Twitter engagement.
He's living the dream.
And keep in mind, what I just find so crazy about all this is that, just to reiterate, the whole premise of this thread is that comic fans were talking about a book that they read on Twitter.
Right.
No one even really mentioned his name per se.
Yeah.
We're talking
Right.
about a few dozen accounts, each with maybe 500, 600 followers.
Max,
Just
like 1,000.
discussing a book that they read, like in a whole day of 24 hours, just as everyone tweets all day, they just randomly just tweeted about a book that they read, just like we all do. And this guy was so confident in what he had done with that book that he wrote a 22-tweet thread addressing the noise.
The noise.
Well,
That's what I
the
love
reason-
about it. He refers to all the tweets and critiques as noise.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
you-
these
look-
guys were basically flies buzzing around his head, and he's like, okay, let's finally just take care of this. Like, I've
Look,
had
Let me
enough.
handle the riffraff.
Yeah.
You guys might call it noise, but this noise to you, sure. But this was like denying the lived experiences of the troops.
Oh my god, yeah.
I think this is a good point to read like my favorite bit from this thread, and what the reason I wanted to touch on this whole run and PKJ's work at all is because of I think the trend it shows in Big Two comics, and specifically their relationship to like how they're getting movie-fied and all that. But I'll just dive right in. He says, this isn't just about today, but FYI, saying comments like these expose an almost cartoonish bias re my work. Yes, I am currently active duty, but even if your assumptions about my views were not wrong, I don't use my work as a delivery system for that stuff. I'm a storyteller.
Hell yeah.
Reading or hearing that I'm a soldier and then proclaiming to Twitter that my work is problematic, dropping little consider the writer comments, making super simplistic and Rishi parallels, it's not the thoughtful progressive move you think it is. There are well over 1 million of us in the U.S. Armed Forces. If you think we all have the same values, I don't know what to say to you. It is an extremely large and extremely diverse group. The people I work with directly every week are women, men, gay, straight, non-binary, trans. He did the Cuomo, I'm a black woman thing. All ethnicities read and pray and love and vote every kind of way. If you read active duty Army and think you've got me figured out, you are big wrong. Action Comics has... I'm almost done. He goes, Action Comics has nothing to do with my or your feelings on U.S. or global politics.
Hell yeah.
Go off, King.
This guy is making a list and checking it twice because this guy knows everything that anyone has ever said about his
He's
work.
got the
I mean,
playbook.
this is-
He wrote the playbook. He wrote the playbook,
This-
shuffled it to the masses, and they thought that they wrote the playbook. No, in reality, he wrote the playbook. They're just playing by his rules.
and
Well, what
obviously- Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just what I was gonna say. What I find just so fucking twisted, what's so insidious about this is it really ties into the liberalism of U.S. foreign policy, which is that any agent of U.S. empire, whether you're a bureaucrat or an army member, it's this kind of like, hey, like I'm part of a lived experience as diverse as yours. I don't pretend to know your life. You don't pretend to know mine. But can't we assume we all want the same things?
So before we go any further, I feel like this is a good time to give the audience a primer of who Philip Kennedy Johnson actually is. Because you might be wondering, well, he's active duty Army. What kind of work does he do for the Army? Is he, like a field troop? Is he doing the kind of things that Tom King allegedly did? And the truth is, Philip Kennedy Johnson is a Sergeant First Class U.S. Army Field Band member. That's right. PKJ is a Army band member. And, you know, before I go any further, I gotta say, Mr. Kennedy Johnson, if you are watching this, I am a huge fan of your music. That man knows how to, like, play a trumpet. Like, goddamn. But anyways, putting that aside, a lot of this information is actually found on an official article written by the U.S. Army on their official website, where they announce him as the new Superman writer. And the title of the article is Super Soldier. DC Comics picks Army musician as new Superman writer. And it gives like a nice little spiel about who PKJ is. You know, like he has a master's degree in music. He joined the U.S. Army Field Band shortly after. And, you know, while he was doing that, he was also writing comics. And that's how he got, you know, his work into the hands of DC Comics. But there's this nice little segment, and I'll read this very quickly, that is very funny. And I think really speaks to the imperialist angle of everything. So it goes, in joining the Army Field Band, he began telling musical stories on a grander scale, traveling across the continental U.S. and telling the tales of the Army through song. Johnson said that the band connects with the public by telling personal stories of U.S. soldiers and historical figures. Recently, the band...
#inspiring.
Recently, the band posted an 18-minute musical tribute to Martin Luther King Jr. And then there's a nice little quote from Johnson where he says, something the U.S. Army Field Band does that I think sets it apart is its use of narrative. The way that we tell personal stories helps us connect with the audience. Storytelling is something I believe in. Isn't that just inspiring?
This guy is a storyteller, man.
This man is a storyteller.
You can't just put it any other way.
Yeah.
This is someone who he knows how to reach out and touch the reader.
Yeah.
Through narrative. How else can you put it?
It's beautiful.
Honestly inspiring. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what MLK would have wanted that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think this the easiest way to hit this is not just the angle of rehabilitating army dudes in the comics industry, but also just talking about, again, we mentioned this with RRR, but like how the culture puts itself into the work. Because, you know, like as much as Mr. Johnson wants to say that his lived experience as an army member doesn't inform his work, it does, you know, like as evidently it goes through his, you know, his pen and onto the page. And I think the biggest aspect of it is just the dehumanization of cultures as aliens. Like we brought up the black-coated alien, but it's so interesting seeing works from like Johnson, who's doing this with the world, and like Tom King, who in Strange Adventures, you know, he creates those non-Iraqi aliens who aren't Iraqi, by the way. They're not from Iraq. They're from this alien planet, and they all die like crazy. Thanks to they die at the hands of our superior blonde hero, Adam Strange, and he feels bad about this. All right, he feels bad about it.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned
conflicted.
He's very conflicted about his role.
This is something that I was worried about. It's like, Bookie Ball, how is he taking this?
Yeah, you know, at the end of
I'm very glad.
It's like American Sniper. You know, like I don't care about you know the faceless brown men he's killing overseas. I want to know how he's feeling. I want to know how Chris Kyle.
Yeah, how does Rocket Raccoon feel about?
Yeah, how does Rocket Raccoon feel about the repercussions of? But it's funny because this isn't the only book that Johnson has written with these kinds of undertones, because in 2020 he wrote a mini series for an event at Marvel, Empire event, and his tie-in was with, unsurprisingly, Captain America. And
before you go on, can I just say one very quick thing?
Sure.
That you brought up in America is very interesting, because even he in his thread brought it up.
Oh,
and
yeah, it's like the next tweet
was so completely revealing of the way this guy thinks.
Oh, yeah.
Because his exact words were that, keep in mind, the entire point of this thread is that people are saying that they read Action Comics and it was giving off imperialist colonizer vibes.
No one mentioned Empire
and-
Captain America
yep.
at all, but he felt the need to bring it up.
Yeah, I was going to add that like they said it has imperialist vibes, and that the writer is also from the U.S. Army. So his entire thesis of the thread up to this point is that people are reading in imperialist. People are reading an imperialist voice into his work.
Yeah, they're reading
just
deep and they're reading it the
because he's a
wrong
Jew.
way.
And he's saying all this to say that like you can't just say anyone who is a troop will have imperialist politics because everyone is so diverse in the army. There's black, brown, gay, non-binary people in the army. So how dare these people associate imperialism with him just because he happens to be an active duty US soldier?
Yeah.
And
I think it's so cool that he did a genuine, like, what do you mean you people, but for the troops?
Yeah.
And then he says, after he says all of that, he says the tweet that Lan is about to read.
So the tweet it's a nice little thread of tweets, and it starts with so this is tweet 7 in the thread, by the way. He says, side note, if perchance you're using my Captain America miniseries as evidence my stories have military, patriotic, or in parentheses he says, I fucking dare you, nationalist leanings. Know this. Marvel asked me to do a 3-issue Empire Cap tie-in in which Cap leads the world's armies. Shield was off the tail. And again, he says this in paragraphs again, or parentheses, I should say. Shield was off the table. I asked.
So he asked for Cap to lead the world's armies and also Shield.
And also Shield, but he couldn't get Shield because Shield got taken down because they were Nazis.
For people who don't know, in Marvel Comics right now, there is no Shield because it was revealed that Shield was Hydra, that Shield was a Nazi organization.
That's okay. That's a whole thing that we can take a whole other podcast to unpack. But anyways,
of course.
That's the reason why he had to. That's why his hand was forced to use the the world's armies.
Yeah, I mean, this dude really is the living embodiment of the focus group for the car, and just the old guy saying, "Oh my God," he admitted.
Oh my God, he okay, but that's the thing.
That's
like
all
the next tweet, he says, against the Kotati, whose sole purpose on Earth was to wipe out all sentient life on Earth. That story was not a debate or a clash of ideologies. It was a super comic-y event tie-in about the would-be end of the human race with magic, laser guns, and a giant plant monster. The mission statement for the mini was super clear, and we told the story we're proud of, one that accomplished a very specific part of a much larger story. So
yeah, it's really cool. He's not defensive or anything.
What this guy has basically said is that Al Ewing was telling some sort of space opera cosmic fantasy, and Marvel was like, you know what this event really needs? This event really needs a book where people can be reminded of like how fucking awesome like Captain America and the troops are, all the world's armies. Remember, not just the U.S. Army, all the world's armies.
We do,
and so
NATO, baby, let's go.
NATO.
The first name they thought of was Philip Kennedy Johnson. Baby, they're like, if we need someone to do this book, it's PKJ, and he's like, hell yeah, a Shield on the table, and they're like, no, you can't use Shield. He's like, anyhow, let's do it. And this is him defending himself from accusations, of writing imperialist comics. This stuff was already at the forefront of his mind. Other people might not even have remembered that this book existed because this was like a tie-in of an event from 2020.
Yeah, 2 years ago. It's probably not in people's consciousness until he brought it up. So again, maybe this just speaks to the terminal Twitter brain of Philip Kennedy Johnson, where like he has been on the defense for so long that like
he's just at the front of his mind. He's constantly thinking of this stuff. He's in the shower thinking of man,
preempting.
if someone ever
if I'm in the shower and someone confronts me with a Captain America
he's like, man, this is how I'm going to phrase that thread. It's going to be so sick. I'm going to bring up my Captain America miniseries where he leads the world's armies against a sort of like Indian coded foreign invader.
Yeah, foreign invader. We got to protect ourselves against
Indian, meaning Native American, of course, not like this, but like
we're canceling
Captain America is defending. Captain America is defending the world from the foreign invaders, and like this thing, that last part that he says is really so like striking to me because he's like, there's no politics in this. It's just a super comic-y event tying about like magic and laser guns and the way they just like infantilize this stuff. Where
it's the comics
anytime
equivalent of saying, like, I'm just a little guy. Come on, I'm just a little guy. I can come on.
It's like these people, these liberals, like this sort of like verified Twitter sort of like writer personality dude, where anytime fans sort of like read anything like milk toast vanilla sort of like baby brain bird food sort of like reading very subtextual, barely subtextual into their work, they're like, oh my god, I'm so glad you caught this. This was really something that I worked hard on. You know, I can't take all the credit. Obviously, my artist is amazing. He can do that. That's always fine. But the second you say one thing that goes against the party line, the second you say something that maybe starts to peel back the facade of, you know, quirky, progressive, fun, rainbow, good vibes, the second you're like, you know, this comic kind of feels like a first worlder saying that he sees the entire formerly colonized world as inherently savage, and like maybe every once in a while some really savage person pops up, and you know, America should really be consciously thinking of sending their best to just take care of that, you know, because it wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't be such an awful thing if some of the worst places in the world just, you know, got liberated by American help. And this is out of the goodness of their hearts. This isn't something that anyone is begging them to do.
Yeah,
you know, it's just
America's just good. So
second,
sorry, I think it's time we sort of wrap this up, because I want to talk about the Twitter brain of this all. Just because, again, Philip Kennedy Johnson isn't the only person name searching. He's not the only person making these passionate defenses
it's a very common
against sentiment. You know, stupid comics Twitter critics. But it is interesting how much he leverages his own audience, because again, it's not like he's talking into the void. He's talking to his followers when he's, you know, like saying all this, and it's interesting. And again, I'm not here to defend comics criticism. That in and of itself, a whole other podcast I can talk about. Yeah, but it definitely delegitimizes critique. Because again, this man's spending day after day name searching for just to pick apart people who critique his work. And it creates a sort of like us versus them mentality against those that are critiquing his work, because it builds them up to be the boogeyman, right? Yeah.
The very second tweet of his thread, he's like, tons of people have been super supportive today, but sincerely, there's absolutely no need to pile on anyone. I'm just taking a moment to clarify my own take. I'd like us all to walk away friends. # what would Superman do? So there's this initial sort of like
he's preempting everything. Building. He's preempting everything. He knows how people are going to react, and yet he still continues to walk down this path. Because again, it's like, I've you know? Yeah, exactly. You know, like I've already handled that as best as I could. I'm sure things will resolve themselves fine.
There's one aspect of this thread that I want to discuss before we move on from PKJ, and it's sort of like what I found the most interesting turn is, because when I read this, I was like, I'm not going to read this whole fucking thing. It's fucking U.S. Army guy. Fuck this shit. But what was really, and I'm not going to find the exact tweet, but as you go through the thread, there's an interesting heel turn where he goes, hey, like, you said this was about Iraq. That would be kind of like gauche of me. No, this isn't. I don't know if he says that exactly. But what he does do is he goes, no, this isn't about Iraq. You want to know what this is about? I didn't even realize it was about this. PKJ. But what this ended up being about was the experiences of trafficking victims.
And when he's Baltimore, Maryland.
And when he says that really gives away a whole other aspect of this man's worldview. Because when I showed that to my girlfriend, and when I showed her some of the jokes you had made, Para, about, you know, how he was like characterizing how black people would be in a story like this, you know, my girlfriend had such an interesting reaction. She's like, oh, so he's just like monetizing the stories of trafficking victims he's helped?
Yeah.
And that's like a whole other sickening aspect of this. I don't have much else to say about that. Like, I just found that so...
Picking that apart is just going to take a whole other hour. Because, I mean, like, my brain just broke just thinking about that.
No, we don't need to pick up that much more. It's just, like, it was so much more of this, like, self-congratulations and, like, you don't know me. And it's like... dude,
his
like,
audience eats it up. This guy's the most progressive comics writer I've ever seen. I mean, how dare anyone say that this guy might have less than perfect politics? Look at how much thought he's putting
Right.
into his books.
It's like, you don't
This
know
isn't
me,
just
and then he
bang,
spends
bang,
22.
laser explosion.
It's like he says, like, you don't know me, and then he spends 22 tweets, like giving a great
Well,
case
and-
for who he actually is.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing I have to say about it is, like, speaking of the troops, there's that joke about the guy who's always like, oh, well, did you know my cousin is a troop? The guys who like to steal the troop valor. I feel like he did that for trafficking victims. He's like, oh, well, did you know I helped trafficking victims? It's like, dude, just like, why did you have to make that online? Like, I'm not judging whether or not you're getting into heaven, bro. Like, you didn't have to like add that.
The guy says in Action Comics #1, Superman was named the champion of the oppressed.
Right.
That's his justification for all of this. I mean, last thing I have to say, honestly, is just if you have a parasocial relationship with a writer on Twitter, all you have to do to maintain that is just read in the most baby-brained interpretation of everything they do. As long as you just look at surface level stuff and say, oh, wow, this was so progressive. I mean,
As long as it's positive,
Yeah, as long as
Right.
it's positive, okay, he's going to like every tweet, he's going to retweet you, he's going to, be your best friend. But the second you read anything slightly grown up, adult, serious into that, all of a sudden you're making noise, you're
And it's
not
I
being
fucking dare
supportive,
you.
you're making a ruckus, you're being toxic, you're being basically you're the other, you're ostracized, you're not part of the club,
Yeah.
You're not doing hashtag what Superman would do. You're
Right.
being
No,
the bad
you're
guy.
doing
Your
bigotry.
critique against the work isn't just a critique against the work, it's actually a critique against the author, and that's bad.
You're saying that the author is a bad person, and
All
you're
right,
bad.
so I think that's a good place to cap that. I mean, we're all saying PKJ is a bad person. So moving on.
Hold on, what?
No, dear listener, we'll let you make up your own mind. This is all this is our literary critique. But
we invite
moving
you
on
to read the thread.
One last note, because I did note this down. Ricardo Federici did the art from issues 1039 onwards, and it's actually like pretty good.
Yes.
Like shout out Federici, you did like a great work. I mean, on the one hand, I can tell that the monthly schedule is actually starting to take a toll on his work because like a cutting corner. That's a whole other thing. But
and there's fill-in artists,
and whatnot.
And I have to say, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that like the only image that he included in the thread that's actually like a page from the thing is like the second instance of a black alien, defending her chains and defending her iron. And it's actually such a very like well depicted like black character in comics, which truly made me happy. Like even in spite of everything I've said, just seeing that woman with like her natural hair and the big nose is sort of like that stuff. The artist, whoever the artist was like
Daniel
fantastic job. Yeah, I mean, just excellent. The colorist as well, fantastic. The skin, the way the light bounced off, like the way black people actually look in like special lighting. Like it was a really, really cool depiction of a black character in a comic, which was like unequivocally just good job. Like regardless of the context, I just have to praise that. It's like, thank you, Daniel Semperi. More of that. We love you.
Oh, that's good. We go out on a high note.
Yeah.
Proof that Paracelsus is not toxic.
I don't know.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the reminder. Unless I'm skipping over something, did we want to talk about our special precious boys?
Yeah. So is this the part where Para mutes himself so we can?
It's up to you, Para. What do you want to do?
Yeah, I guess I can mute myself since my guest spot is over.
Yeah, it's actually really funny. We're just telling when you can and can't speak. It's like, all right, Para, time to turn off your mic.
Yeah. I would not complain if I just became like a recurring guest on the show, but was never actually a real co-host, just like a sort of like remote control take machine. Okay, Para, time to speak. Mic on, and then okay, thank you.
Okay, before you mute yourself, any last words for the boys, Ramon and Daniel?
Obviously, as the intro so beautifully said, critical support as always. We understand that nothing worth doing is worth rushing. We know that it's something that you're working on that you want to be proud of, and I am very sure that when it comes out, we'll also be proud of it. So keep it up. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe. Keep at it. All the best. Thank you.
All right. You can mute yourself. Perfect.
I think Para said that really well. There's been rumblings within the MFer community of people like just they're just excited. They want their next fix, and I get it.
Yeah.
But Lan and I are here to say, like, look, we're not here to pressure our special precious boys Ramon and Daniel.
Yeah, we just want
As
to
Para
give
said,
something to chew on while they're waiting, I guess.
Yeah. So this is where we talk about what they've been up to. Did you want to start with Daniel?
Oh, am I taking Daniel this time? Perfect. Okay, cool. So Daniel's up to stuff. So holy what stuff that he's doing with Seth Jacob, also a very nice guy.
It looks so sick.
Shout out Seth. Seth, I hope you're doing well. I'm talking about Seth more than I'm talking about Daniel at this point. I'm still bringing up Daniel's Twitter.
We don't talk about art. We just talk about the writers.
Yeah, we just talk about the writers. That's how you know we're really a comics podcast. So Daniel's been posting some really nice art of Chun-Li. He's been doing a lot of retweeting. But most importantly, Holy West is finally done. The first issue is finally done, according to an update from Seth. The physical versions are printed, ready to go. So I think it's just a matter of shipping them. I'm still waiting for mine, so chop.
Yeah, I can't wait to read it. It looks fucking awesome. I know Daniel isn't having. I know it's hard for Daniel not to post about it, but every time I see an update on it, it just looks gorgeous. Yeah, he's doing a lot of basketball, and I think similar to Daniel, Ramon has his project that he's legally not allowed to talk about, but having been privy
I think we're allowed to say that it's for a bad idea.
Yeah, we can check with him if we need. But all I'll say is I've got a feeling that book is going to be sick.
I think it's going to look splendid. I think it's going to look absolutely radical.
Yeah, and just to be, completely real here, like I want Ramon to be able to like make that book the best it'll be. And as much as I love the Max Flintayo, like making that book good is like the number one priority. So if I got
it's really dope. The Bad Idea is also just giving him, like that sort of leeway to do it. Like, for as much as I've joked about Bad Idea in the past, I think, like the focus on the actual artists themselves, at least from an outsider's perspective, actually seems really good.
No, I'm really glad you mentioned that because like I think a lot of people get caught up in like debating, whether they get caught up in purity tests, and it's like I don't think you have to like adore the Bad Idea model, but like it is different, right? Like what we just spent all that time talking about, like how much this action run sucks is being like indicative of like why this big two centric model and this writer centric model can like fucking suck.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like of what I know of like how fucking cool this book will be that Ramon is doing. Like I wish more people would be a little more receptive to how this Bad Idea model can like really allow comics to be comics.
Yeah, I mean, I think
that's not a little vague, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, because I mean the binge model and the monthly comics model are both very unsustainable models.
Yes,
and again, like I mentioned a tiny bit with Federici's work on action, like Federici, he's usually on covers and they look magnificent. Like beautiful painted spreads, but like his work in the comics, it's still good, I should say. But, you can really tell that he's having to cut corners and sort of, like take paths that he otherwise shouldn't feel forced to have to take as an artist just to meet that monthly schedule. It sucks to watch from a side. And again, this isn't like a judgment of his work or his ethic or work ethic, I should say. But I mean, like that happens to everybody that works in monthly comics,
right? No, exactly.
They're not a workhorse, basically.
Right. I don't think anyone would misinterpret that as a criticism of Federici. I think the bigger problem here is from the other angle. I think the problem is that a great amount of comics consumers, comics readers, like can't imagine it being another way, right? And regardless of any criticisms you have of Bad Idea, it's like what we know about like how well artists can be treated there, how like good the final product can be. Like I'm supportive of anything like that can like allow comics to be more, to like let those artists flourish, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So we had a whole other segment prior to this, basically a viewer call-in segment, and I say call in as in CALLIN and not COLLIN. Not shouting out Colin.
You know, you burned that guy.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But seeing as there's no one actually here to call us in, I guess this is where we sort of advertise our future ventures, which is to say, we have no fucking clue. We have no fucking clue what we're going to be doing with this thing.
Well, I mean, yeah, this show might come out before the next episode of Mex Flentayo.
Ideally, that's the goal.
We'll see.
That's the main reason we're re-recording this thing.
Yeah. But yeah, we might do this again. We might not. But yeah, anything else you want to cover before we sign off, Lan? I got like about 10 more minutes.
Comics are crazy, honestly. I've been so like disjointed from like as a community for a while now. You know, like whenever I go into my comic shop and I just tell my LCS owner, you know, like, hey, what's new? And he just gives me like a pile of books. You know, like I don't even question what he puts onto my pile. I just, you know, go with the flow. That's how disjointed I am from. And I think it's always interesting to dip my toe back into these things, especially with, you know, like comics Twitter stuff. Just because, do you want to talk a little bit about our little encounter with those Twitter stands before we leave? Perry came back just for this segment.
Yeah, I will say, you know, for the most thorough recap of like Twitter stan insanity, that Gutter Boys up with Gleb and Ramon was really good. But yeah, I mean, I had actually never had an encounter with Stan Twitter before, and like I will acknowledge that I was being mentally ill in my own way by engaging, but like for me it was more like I can look at all the things I said to those people, and I can say like I was being direct, I was being confrontational, but I wasn't trying to bully these people. Every post I made, I'm saying like, do you actually know what's going on here? Do you care about learning more? And just trying to basically engage with these people about like, hey, who is Gleb? Who is the man behind your like cartoon character drawings? Was met with "fuck you, kill yourself."
All I'll say is the kids are not all right.
You tried to be an adult, and they were not having it.
Yeah, you're trying to be an adult on a kids platform.
Well, and like I work with kids, and the kids I work with are not like that. And that's why like I wasn't.
Disease.
And a lot of times,
just
like
fandom
kids,
disease too, because again, Gleb mentioned this perfectly in his thread, basically, you know, listing out his pathos for not engaging with Stan Twitter. But you know, like that whole summarization, Gleb did some fantastic artwork of Talia al Ghul in lingerie. Someone photoshopped it into that 9/11 pic that Milo Manara drew. Stan Twitter got angry about it. He said that in that controversy, he realized that stans don't see him as a person. They just see him as a vehicle to get the content they want, which is, you know, like nice Damian Wayne art. And I think
that's absolutely what it is.
And I think that
is a content delivery mechanism.
Yeah, and that's what really boiled it down for me. It's like these are deranged people, care only about the content and the purity of the content, and not the people who are actually making the work. And yeah, it kind of just ruined my faith in humanity for a little bit. I had to go outside.
Well, yeah, because
I touched a bit of grass.
There were some people who, you know, were on our side, for lack of a better term, who were looking at it, and you know, their first reaction was just feeling, and this was from you too, Lan, you know, just the first reaction was like, what is going wrong with these kids' lives? Because like, I'm not mad at all about these kids. Like when I was noticing like, wow, the third kid is telling me to kill myself, I'm like, what the fuck are the parents doing here?
I mean, okay, and I think I'll give a bit of insight as a younger person here, and did engage with fandom circles when I was younger, and I think there is sort of like a blindness that fandom affords you, just insofar as having that veil in front of you and not really seeing people as people, but rather avatars on a screen. That
Yeah.
Especially people who are, sorry to interrupt, but especially people who are like behind the curtain, where
it's the Wizard of Oz syndrome.
everyone who isn't working in comics is like normal, and everyone who is working in comics is like on the inside and like a rich and famous person who you can be as mean to as you want with no repercussions because they don't
they're
care
getting
'cause
paid
super
well. They're
rich.
getting paid
Yeah.
to be harassed, to get harassed. Yeah.
You know, there was one interaction that I specifically want to reference that I found just fascinating. This is the one that I screenshotted, and I screenshotted because I didn't want to quote tweet this person. I didn't want to harass them or anything. But you know, when this person, one of these kids was just going off about like how Gleb was just so insensitive and essentially doing hate crimes. It was just like, I noticed this person in their bio, it says, read Mr. Miracle. And I'm like, well, which is this the Mr. Miracle you're talking about? And I wasn't trying to do like a gotcha. I'm just like, is it this one?
Just
And
curiosity.
I'm sorry.
curious.
I'm sorry. You said that, and my mind immediately to the fucking Ave Maria scene from the Batman. You know, where he was saying Ave Maria.
It really was that beautiful.
It's
though,
so
because,
beautiful. These are beautiful minds.
right? And I think it really says a lot about where the Stan mind is at, like how pick and choose it is. Because when I showed them the Tom King Mr. Miracle, the response was just better than anything I could hope for. They said, "Yeah, I can separate the art from the artist." Incredible. It works on so many levels, you know.
Like they probably didn't put a single bit of thought into that response. They probably didn't think about like what that would mean for their whole fucking argument. And I think that's just beautiful. Twitter is just a beautiful place. Fandom, beautiful. Stans, they're all so beautiful. Mentally.
Right. And I think it showed me a lot because it wasn't just like how insane the politics of that statement was, like the real world politics. I think the Twitter politics of it were really interesting because it's like, well, no, I reject an artist like Gleb because he's, you know, making ironic jokes and I have to think about what he's trying to say here, right? And I can misinterpret some of this as bigoted if I am feeling that way versus someone like Tom King who just is always like, you know, carrying himself with that sort of liberal sincerity. Right? It's like Tom King knows how to be a good boy online.
Yeah, exactly. He's a good boy online. He doesn't act up. You know, he doesn't speak against...
You never catch him sleeping.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that was like really fascinating into these kids' minds.
Purity
like,
isn't just of the work, it's of the creators too. A certain purity is expected. A certain compliance is expected of
you have to
creators.
be a good boy.
Yeah, you got to be a good boy. Good guy roles only.
Yeah. Right. And like I really saw like, oh, Stan Twitter like is just teaching you how to be a cop. Like, fucking great. Awesome.
Yep.
Always the motherfuckers with ACAB in bio.
Yes.
Always.
Oh, I was just going to make a joke where it's like you put the fucking communist symbol in your bio and it's like read Sheriff of Babylon.
I think that's the perfect note to end this on.
Yeah. Thank you all for listening, all 5 of you who will listen to us and accompanying us on this wild ride of foreign film, comics criticism, supporting the troops, all that. Like I said, we don't know if we'll do this again. We might not. But once again, like Lan and I said earlier, this is for all the gremlins, all the goblins out there. Hope you enjoyed. If I'll say this, if needed, we'll do this again.
Yeah, if another emergency comes up.
Exactly. Yeah. Before I sign out, Lan, is there anything you want to plug?
Yeah, on a more serious note, just because I had all those shout outs in the beginning, some proper acknowledgements, solidarity with people in Palestine and all the indigenous peoples around the world fighting for their land, but also just their right to exist. Shout out to those fighting for union and labor rights. And shout out to those fighting against oppressive structures all around the world.
Yeah. I don't need to go into it too much, but the news about the Starbucks unionization has been really interesting to follow. And
shout out to Tyler. My buddy Tyler is on the forefront of that, and he's been doing absolutely fan-fucking-tastic. So
yeah,
great work.
I have a friend too who's trying to do that, and it's like, you know, it's not obviously always something you can feel like you're on the winning side of, but like there is progress being made, and it's cool to see people struggle. Yeah, I think it is something that truly like helps lift me out of any nihilistic pits.
Oh yeah.
So everything Land said, stand with the oppressed. And I guess selfishly, I'm going to plug my YouTube.
Oh shit, I should be plugging my YouTube too.
You should be plugging your YouTube. Yeah, I've stalked yours a little bit.
Yeah, I haven't touched that.
I was going to say, you like me are a little behind on posting, but hey, just because our stuff is old, maybe we have oldies, but they're not moldies.
Oh,
I make my shit to last, and I've watched your shit, and I know you do too. So go over to Land's channel if you want to watch some like good comics criticism.
It's Lands Vids, LANSVIDS.
And then go to mine. I don't know my channel, but
let me just search let me just Google Salt and Bank YouTube channel real quick and see what.
Yeah, well, I am Salt and Bank M like but, morning.
Yeah, I know. For some reason,
I'm really bad at plugging my own shit. But Salt M Bank on Twitter, and my YouTube link is in my bio. Movies I make. Yeah, my stuff's not really comics related so much. Just a lot of I don't know, storytelling, comedy, physical comedy.
That's good. It's always good to have that variety.
Yeah.
Yeah, my Twitter, I completely forgot to plug that. That's LANTWEETS. Post prayers occasionally. I post about agony all the time.
Hell yeah. And last thing I'll say before we go, listen to Max Flantayo, the real one.
The real one. Or else.
You going to sign us off here, Lan?
Oh, yes. Have yourselves a damn good one, and see you on the flip side.
We are